Why would we take God's clear commandments and do the opposite with them? Besides the fact that we're just sinners by nature. Because of that sin, we live by a principle. I call it the principle of personal justice, which says life may not be fair for everyone, but I'll make sure it is for me. There's lots of people out there that are the Charlie Browns of our world that always lose out. I'm not going to be one of those. I'm going to make sure I win every confrontation. I'm going to make sure I stand up for myself and my rights, and no one's going to take advantage of me. We think that's strength. That's what the world calls strength, but it's actually weakness. It's actually a very fear-based way to live. Remember when we were little kids? Everybody, when you're an adult, you think, oh, to be a kid again, to be carefree. Being a kid is one of the scariest times of your life because there's all the bullies on the playground. You think, I can't show weakness. I got to beat up this kid that's smaller than me so everybody thinks I'm tough. If everybody's making fun of the one kid that's a little awkward, I need to make fun of him too, because that way they won't be making fun of me. There's a very much of a law of the jungle aspect to childhood, if you recall. And if you don't recall, you've forgotten, because it's true. And we're just big, hairy 5-year-olds. And we want our chicken nuggies and our ice cream, and we don't want to have to eat any broccoli. And we want your toys as well as my toys. And if you pull my hair, I'm going to bonk you in the nose. And that's the way we live. It's the law of personal justice. And it's the reason why there are wars today. It's the reason why families break up. It's the reason why friendships don't last and communities are divided. It's the root of so many of our issues. The law of personal justice, the principle of personal justice. Jesus is calling us to a different principle, and I call it the principle of love. The principle of love says the best way to live is by putting the needs of others first. You might say, it's impossible for me to love everybody. There's people that I can't stand. Jesus didn't say you have to look at that person and say, aren't they adorable? Because there are people that are just going to rub you the wrong way. And there are people who, because of what they've done to you, you will never get to the point where you like that person, but you choose to advance their good. You will the good for them. You pray for good to happen to them. You intentionally behave with kindness toward them. You refuse to run them down behind their back. You choose at all times to treat them the way you would want to be treated. And some say that is so unrealistic. Nobody can live that way, but I've seen it. I remember one of the first times I was struck by this. I was in seminary, and so I was in my early 20s. In fact, I was in a youth ministry class in seminary. We had to take one youth ministry class as part of my degree plan. And so all these guys, all of us were 23, 24 years old. There was one guy in the class that was in his mid-40s, so 20 years older than us. One day, every day we took prayer requests and prayed before we started class. And on this day, the older man in our class, I'm older than him now, so it's funny to call him that. But he said, I have a prayer request. He said, there's this young man, and he gave his name. He said, this guy was dating my daughter. My wife and I knew he wasn't a good person, wasn't good for our daughter, and so we made them break up. But he wouldn't accept it. And so for the last month, he's been basically following her around all day at school. Every time she turns around, he's standing there. At night, we see him driving past our house real slow with the stereo turned up real loud, so we'll hear him. And it's just really scaring my daughter, and it's been making me angry. And last night, he just pulled up in front of our house and just sat there. And he said, I was on my way out the door to just take him apart. Now, every one of the rest of us, none of the rest of us had teenage kids. Only a handful had kids, period. And yet all of us were sitting there going, yeah, take him apart. I remember my own fists were clenched. I didn't have any kids at all, but I'm like, yeah, let's see some vengeance. I want this guy to get his pound of flesh. But he said, as my hand was on the door, the Lord spoke to me and said, that's not what I've called you to do. He said, I walked out to that door, not knowing what I was going to do. I walked out to that car, and to my surprise, he didn't drive away. I knocked on the window, and he unlocked the door, and I sat down beside him. And I sat there for an hour, and I shared the gospel with him, and he accepted Christ. He said, my prayer request is that this young man would live out his faith, would get baptized, and would become a man of God. And we were just blown away. That's not the way we thought that story would go. That's not the way the story goes when we tell that kind of story, right? And yet that's what God has called us to. The principle of love. The principle of, I'm going to will the good for this person. They may not accept it. They may respond by spitting in my face. They may respond by rejecting entirely the love that I offer, and yet I'm going to do what Christ has called me to do. There's another way to put this, okay? If you don't like that term, the principle of love, here it is. In a world where everybody has thin skin and a hard heart, where we take offense at the slightest insult or at the littlest, the smallest disagreement, and we blow it up into something big, where our hearts are hardened and we refuse to show compassion, we refuse to show weakness, we refuse to show vulnerability at all. In a world where everyone has thin skin and a hard heart, Christ is calling us to thick skin and a soft heart. And you want to talk about strength. You talk about someone who's got a hide like a rhinoceros, and insults just roll right off of them. And they're so impossible to offend. And yet, when they see someone struggling, when they see the hurts, even of someone who's not likable, they are there in a heartbeat to offer help, to pray, to comfort, to weep alongside those who weep. That's strength. That's what Christ has called us to.